Yo, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Build a Mind podcast. Today, we are going to do something a little bit different. So, we are going to be streaming this live to the Twitter, to the YouTube, and to my personal Twitter as well. We're just trying to see how this goes. Obviously, this is a trial run. Bear with us. Anyways, super happy to talk about what we're doing today, what we're going to be going over and discussing. And this is something that a lot of people don't quite understand. So, how is Bitcoin mining good for the environment? How is Bitcoin good for the planet? What are the different things that are happening within the Bitcoin mining space that are changing the way that we look at waste and energy production and recycling? Super excited to get into this. So our guest today is Dan Kohler. Dan is a crypto executive, IT engineer, an entrepreneur, and a world traveler. As the chief mining officer at Kratos Digital Mining, he leads innovation in cryptocurrency mining site operations, bridging the gap between cutting-edge technology and sustainable growth. Whether it's managing his fintech equipment brokerage at ASIC Plug or exploring new opportunities across the globe, Dan thrives at the intersection of technology, entrepreneurship, and adventure. Travel is more than just a passion, it's a business. As a third-generation travel advisor and owner of Travel with Bridget, he creates unforgettable journeys connecting people with the world. Technology, adventure, and growth are his guiding principles. I am super excited to dive into this and to kind of give you an overview of what we're actually going to be talking today is a couple of months ago, Bitcoin Mining World released a video, and we created a documentary about a small operation that's happening where they're taking tires, rubber tires, breaking them down and turning it into Bitcoin. How does that process work, and why is this technology so impactful for the world? We're going to dive into it. It's going to be a lot of fun. But before we do, watch this.
Join the Mastermind Club, a weekly gathering of Bitcoin miners sharing insights to help you optimize or build your mining business. Our community fosters open discussion and collaboration, connecting you with experts who can help you overcome challenges and find solutions faster. Every other week, we host the Mastermind Deep Dive, where industry leaders delve into the financial, operational, and optimization hurdles faced by miners like you. Brought to you by Bitcoin Mining World.
All right, guys, if you want to join the Mastermind Club, go to the QR code at the bottom of your screen over there and join us. Every other week we do deep dives. Every week we do a community session where we just kind of hold each other accountable, talk about each other's projects. It's going to be great. This Friday, so tomorrow, we're actually doing a mastermind deep dive with Tyler Stevens. He's going to be coming in and talking about his Heat Punks manifesto. So that's going to be fun. I'm really looking forward to it. And then next month we'll have Joe Lively on to talk about site operations and build out. It's going to be a good time. One more thing before we dive into the podcast with Dan. Have you guys heard about the Undermine Heat Punk Summit that's happening in Denver? Well, if you haven't, Undermine is a groundbreaking 2-day conference, February 21st through the 22nd. This conference is dedicated to the rapidly emerging field of hash rate heating, harnessing Bitcoin miners to power electric heating infrastructure. The hash rate heat punks are a group of Bitcoiners undermining the status quo. Mining doesn't have to be centralized in pubco mega facilities or centralized massive mining pools. Home mining doesn't have to be exclusive to the ideological motivated either. Instead, we can bring mining to all via heating appliances and home devices. As the Bitcoin mining industry undergoes a transformative phase, the potential to unlock additional utility through heating has become clear. This Heat Punk Summit brings together the brightest minds and hands-on builders, tinkerers, plebs, engineers, tradespeople, contractors, and companies to collaborate on advancing the home mining space. By leveraging Bitcoin miners for heating, we can decentralize network hash rate, lower utility costs, and accelerate Bitcoin adoption as a neutral monetary asset. So join us in shaping the future of Bitcoin mining. Go to this link. Let me pull it up real fast. Sorry, I didn't have it ready. I should have done that. Where'd it go? Hold on, guys. I will get it. There it is. Go to this link at the bottom of your screen right now. It's also going to be in the show notes if you're not watching live. That's where you can go and you can get your tickets to the Denver Heat Punk Summit. It's 100,000 sats. We're not talking about dollars here. We're talking about sats. It's going to be a great time. I'm going to be there. A lot of the guests that have been on this podcast in the past are also going to be there as well. So I'm really looking forward to it. I am a heat punk, and I hope that you guys will come out and join us. All right, enough of the laundry list, enough of the to-do items. We're going to bring Dan onto the stage. Dan, welcome to the Build a Mind podcast.
Hey, Trevor, thank you for having me.
Yeah, we're happy to have you here, man. I just got to say, you are doing some incredible things in the space. And, the show here is all about trying to break the FUD. We want to make sure that the fear, uncertainty, and doubt is kind of broken down, and we really show what Bitcoin mining is doing. And when I first, I told you this, off recording, when I first saw what you guys are doing with the tire mine, my head exploded. And I wasn't even thinking about the actual process of breaking down the tires. I was thinking about the implications that this has for the world, just thinking about what happens when we can monetize a process of waste removal and then use that to clean up our water, clean up our air, clean up our soil. What does the world look like 50 years out? So before we dive into the actual episode today, and before we dive into what you guys are doing out there, I want to set the scene by telling the audience who you are, what your background is, and how you came to Bitcoin.
Yeah, absolutely, and I appreciate the intro blurb. That was great. So I'm Dan Kohler. I am an IT engineer by trade. I was working a lot in rural telecom back before the Starlink days, and my connections through rural telecom got me into an electrical contractor who connected me with a mining company. So I went out and did some site surveys and said, yeah, I can get you internet out here. And they're like, well, we're building massive data centers. I'm like, that's what's going on. So that's different than, hey, here's an LTE box to run a job trailer. So they read me in on the scope, and I'm like, that's cool. That's some cool stuff. So I dug in, put together a project plan, and they were so impressed they brought me onto staff. So that was early 2020s, 2021 timeframe, and I got brought into the industry there, and have been, thriving in fintech ever since. Have a couple of different business units that I operate. The founder of ASIC Plug. We do concierge procurement of equipment and miners and infrastructure. As mentioned before, my family has a travel agency. I'm a third generation travel advisor. So I've got a team and staff that do that. But primarily, I focus on the technical operations. And then now, as we start phasing more towards the recycled goods and power generation side, getting heavily involved in that aspect. And it's really exciting.
No, it really is. There's this whole idea in Bitcoin mining that the Bitcoin miners are going to become power producers. Now, that's not to say that they're going to be these large scale infrastructure operations where, they're operating 100 megawatts or, 1,000 megawatts, a gigawatt or whatever. That's not to say that. That's to say that the Bitcoin miners are going to seek out the lowest cost of power, and a lot of times that means becoming their own power generation plant. So we're thinking hydro dams, we're thinking solar farms, wind farms, these kinds of operations. But specifically what you are doing has taken that whole idea of generating your own power to a different level. And we've talked before on this podcast with Paul Cockerham from Verde. They're doing something down in the Permian Basin where they extract the natural gas from oil and gas wells, and they pipe that into a generator. Bada bing, bada boom, you're mining Bitcoin with it. You're doing something similar but completely different. So before we explain what you're doing, can you just explain to us the idea of turning waste into energy and its relevance to Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, absolutely. So to be successful, quote unquote, in Bitcoin mining, you need to get low cost energy, and you need to dissipate heat. That heat punks plug, that seems really cool. I'm going to look into that summit. That's something I'm passionate about.
It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. If you can get low cost energy and you can mitigate your heat, then you're golden. So what we're trying to do is, energy prices rise as energy demands rise. We're trying to find creative methods to produce our own energy and have a positive impact on the world. And when this project came across my desk and I was looking into it, I'm like, that's physics tells us that's not possible. Chemistry tells us that's not possible. Um, they say they're doing it. So I went down there to look at the tire system. I'm like, I see it happening in front of my eyes. So I dug into the science. I'm like, okay, so there's a lot of proprietary stuff in there, but it is possible and it is being done. And we are producing energy. We are producing vaporous gases to run in generators by deconstructing tires. And the reason that that's important is tires are one of the number one waste products that are improperly disposed of, that are clogging up landfills, clogging up the sides of roads. I live in a rural-ish part of Texas, and every day on the side of the highway somewhere there's trash thrown out where someone just comes and they dump it, and usually there's tires around, and that's because there's no proper avenue to dispose and recycle tires that is effective. They'll shred them and turn them into playgrounds and reuse some of the rubber for some things, but when you can take a tire and completely 100% eliminate the tire and turn it into usable products, that's a game changer. And when a big piece of that usable product is energy that you can run through a carbon neutral generator and consume your power on site without having to deal with transmission, without having to deal with transporting trucks of fuels, it's a win-win all around. There's no negatives to it at all.
Yeah. I mean, okay. So first thing I want to address is we talk about the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. There has been countless articles about how Bitcoin mining is going to use up the world's energy in the next 4 years, or they're boiling oceans, they're putting off CO2, all of these things that are completely blatantly untrue. I mean, it's a fact that Bitcoin miners are probably one of the most environmentally friendly industries that we have seen in the last 100 years. Now,
absolutely,
this idea of generating power for your Bitcoin miners, which you need to mine Bitcoin, which is a revenue generating process. This idea of harnessing waste is something that is extremely exciting to me, because it's not just, like I said, it's not just tires. I alluded to it before, but there's been plenty of waste processes that mine Bitcoin. You've got oil and well sites down in the Permian Basin and all over the world, really, that are generating Bitcoin from the natural gas. But then you also have methane extraction sites that are popping up in landfills and farms that are capturing this methane and burning it. What are some of the other things that you see, before we actually dive into the process a little bit? What are some of the other things that you're seeing where Bitcoin miners are generating energy for this process in wasteful industries?
Yeah, I've seen there's a guy out in Canada from Canada that I met at the Merkel Bitmain hydro facility when I was doing a tour there, and they're doing a lot in wood gasification. So as wood and trees come down, they're creating power from wood itself that is kind of scrap or otherwise unusable there. We've got the tire projects that we're talking about. A number of people have tried it, but using systems like pyrolysis, which essentially incinerates the tire, you get some toxic sludge, you get some goo, you do create the heat, you can create energy, but it's not a clean process that operates like ours. And then, as you mentioned, there's the biofuels from farms, from cattle, from landfills, all that is viable, but it is less stable and less consistent than something like a process where we know we put X pounds of feedstock in, we'll get, between Y and Z gallons or amounts of fuel out to run the generators. One of the exciting sites, or the exciting aspects of something like this, is when you load up a crypto mining container or building or whatever scale you're doing, you have modular ability to adjust that. If you're running on a lower yield that day for whatever reason, maybe your shipment of tires or feedstocks didn't come in, you can shut down half the miners and you don't have to burn through all the fuel that day and then have downtime. But the ability to produce your own fuel, produce your own energy in an off-grid or a microgrid situation, and then utilize that to generate Bitcoin, then you have the ability to create jobs. You use that coin, you consume that coin to pay infrastructure, pay jobs, pay for your next batch of tires to get out of the landfill, to get brought out there. And there's, like I said, no downsides at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
obviously there's a lot of proprietary technology that goes into this process. Can you just at a high level tell us how this tire breakdown process works? And just how much do you like, what do you obviously obviously you can't just go down the street, grab a piece of tire, throw it into the machine and have it start breaking down. And I know that there's proprietary tech, so just tell us what you can about this process.
Yeah, absolutely. So high level, you take your truckload of tires straight from the landfill. They go into some kind of shredder, and that's going to help you extract the steel out, because the steel you don't want to put into the vessel. The steel you can recycle separately, sell, run through and make other products out of and get it from there. When you have your raw tire shreds, they'll go into the canister, into the vessel, and they'll drop into the proprietary catalyst that is properly maintained at the right temperature formula with the right pressures, and it will I call it molecular deconstruction, because in time, as the rubber starts to settle into the catalyst, it separates out, where you have your gases coming off and you have what's left in there into a liquid rubber that is more dense and drips down to the bottom. So, and we go through in depth into the documentary. So I don't know, I'm assuming people watching this podcast have seen that, or they're gonna go see it now, because this is some awesome stuff.
We're gonna share the documentary in the show notes as well. I don't have it right now, so anybody watching live, I apologize. Go to the Build a Mine YouTube, or go to the Build a Mine X account, and we'll share it there. Sorry, Dan.
Yeah, so it's really cool. But you get your liquid rubber offtake that sinks down to the bottom. Your vaporous gases come out to the top, and then it goes through a condensing unit to cool it. So after it goes through the condenser, what you get is your liquid fuel, which is your, we colloquially call it diesel. It's a mixture of a number of different hydrocarbons in there, but it's your liquid diesel. And then you have your aerosolized gas that separates out, which we refer to as propane. It's a mixture of propane, methane, and some of the other anes, but it is a consumable, generator safe aerosolized gas. So that goes out through a vacuum pump, gets compressed into your propane tank. Your liquid diesel gets pumped into your diesel tank, and then your rubber offtake gets pumped into your rubber tank. Now the rubber is almost like a tar consistency, and with a few additives, some gravel, some other, depending on the chemical composite, some sulfur and some other things, you have asphalt. So you can turn it into asphalt. If you don't do the gravel and things, you can use it as an additive to create industrial roofing. You can use it for many industrial projects where otherwise they would be going out and buying virgin rubber and cutting down trees, whereas this is stripped of the the fuel consuming carbon, the hydrocarbons that come out. You've got your liquid rubber that can go in and supplement a feedstock for some other industry who otherwise would be having to buy new or virgin rubber. And then you've got two forms of fuels. You've got your diesel and you've got your propane mixtures. Both can run through generators, create power. They can be sold as well. Run the diesel can be running fleets of trucks while you use your off gas or your propane for power. So in the documentary, we highlighted using it directly to run Bitcoin mining. We had an upstream data hash hut out there. I had, I believe, 22 miners in there running when we had it fired up and going, and it was awesome. Seeing that I can throw tires into the top of a machine and have miners running is just mind blowing to me still to this day. But if your use case isn't, I need to consume all of that for mining, you can use those fuels for other things. You can run a barbecue on it. You can, put it into a properly rated diesel engine for a vehicle. Now, I'm not saying buy our stock and do that without having, your own engineers check it out, because we don't warranty your vehicle if something were to happen. But when I was talking with one of the inventors, the performance that he's gotten out of this liquid diesel fuel has been phenomenal, compared to what you buy at the pump, as far as longevity, and the torque that he was telling us about a time that he got a weed eater out, and he completely drained it. He was doing a demonstration. He put the stuff in there, and that thing was ripping. It was cutting through bushes, and the torque in it was twisting. It was impressive stuff to see. So I'm really excited to see this project continue moving forward. And all of that's just on the tires. That's not even touching on the plastics yet.
Yeah, that was something that I wanted to get into after this, is that it's not just rubber. You're not just able to break down rubber into its component parts and sell off the rubber, sell off the metal, and use the diesel and the propane to mine Bitcoin or in other processes like you were mentioning. But you can also break down plastics. And now what I want to highlight is, we've seen this huge push towards paper straws and paper cups and all these other things because of one reason or another. But at the end of the day, it's because plastic doesn't break down. It's wasteful to the environment. You're seeing microplastics in everything. I mean, literally to the bottom of the ocean, to men's balls, we're seeing microplastics in. So it's something that, like, this is an actual worry in the world. It's like something that we're actually worried about, is the amount of plastic waste that we have. But now all of a sudden, the same process that you're talking about can be used to start to break down some of those plastics. Can you just tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So, very similar system, same organization structure. You don't have to have the same shredding of the tires to get the steel out. With plastics, you would run it through like a pelletizer. I don't know, it's kind of like a grinder. You get little beads out of it. So you'd get your plastics in, you'd extrude it into the middle of your canister, and it would process similar to the tires, but you don't get liquid rubber out. So with the plastics, you only get your vaporous gas that then separates out to your diesel and your propanes. But because there's no rubber in it, you don't get the liquid dripping out the bottom. So because of that factor, because you don't have to have that vertical height, that drop time to separate out and get your liquid down, you can actually make it a more condensed unit. And one of the things that we're working on right now is making it convenient to produce in mass and then ship and distribute. As you saw in the tire video that we did, the documentary, it's a big unit. It's not easy to put on a truck and be like, oh, here you go, plug it in. Whereas on the plastic side, that is something that is attainable and very viable. So we can get that going. And because of the high availability of plastics everywhere and the ability to create fuels from it, it gives us the opportunity to target areas that otherwise aren't well served for power generation or waste management.
Mm-hmm.
There's a number, multiple foreign countries have come to us and said, hey, we need help with this. Can you, come and help and sort this? So we're talking with groups to come out and build waste processing plants that would have the citizens, the people, collect their plastic bottles and their plastic materials and come in, and we'll get it cleaned and shredded and put into the system and be able to provide power.
And then also this is providing jobs for these people.
Yeah.
So it's providing, like, let's take the Bitcoin completely out of it. The Bitcoin is great. We're generating power to create Bitcoin, which is, the strongest form of money in the world. That's all great. But let's go to like a third world country that is just filling up with trash because they don't have the landfill infrastructure that we have here in the United States. And they're just,
Right.
it's filling up with garbage, with debris that doesn't break down. What you're saying is that you are now incentivizing the populace to go out and clean up their streets, clean up their environment, get paid to do so. And then that waste is being broken down into these pellets that you then use as feedstock for this process of generating energy, which goes back into, in a virtuous cycle, it goes back into the community by allowing people to pay less for energy.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. There's so I mentioned you briefly. We've been talking with numerous countries. One of them is the government of Jamaica. Jamaica is a Caribbean island. Their entire power generation is dependent on bringing in tanker ships of diesel. They're an island. They have some solar and stuff, but with the winds out there, wind isn't really a viable power source for them. They don't have a lot of fresh running water for hydropower sources. Don't have a lot of oil resources. It is a island out in the middle of the Caribbean, so they are wholly dependent on importing diesel from foreign nations via tanker ships. And they run those in generators to create power for the entire island, realizing a net power cost of more than 40 cents a kilowatt hour to the consumer. That's brutal.
Yeah.
Now, Jamaica, also an island, not a whole lot of garbage facilities. So it is littered with tires and plastics and trash, and being so tourism and consumer focused, they're constantly bringing in stuff from other countries that then they don't have the proper facilities to dispose of. So this would allow us to set up, and whether or not Bitcoin is done there, I don't know yet, but we can come in, set up, process, create energy, and aggregate blend their entire country's power costs down by reducing the demand on outside imported diesel, because we can consume fuels created from their own trash that they have to find a way to get rid of anyways. And now if they don't have to collect and consume it and then ship it off in a barge somewhere, they can collect and burn it through the clean digester system and then into generators, lowering their energy costs. I mean, it's a huge win-win all around, and again, creating more jobs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the thing that I'm thinking here is that it's not just like we're talking about all these waste processes that can be turned into energy, and cleaning up waste is a big problem for the entire world, let alone for a small island nation like Jamaica. But this idea of, three processes: you've got your tire processor, you've got your plastics processor, and you've got your waste or your methane mitigation site. These three processes are breaking down, without understanding the heuristics of it, like I would guess that it's breaking down 90%, 95% of all of the waste on the island, and turning that into some sort of power generation to, like you said, go back into the livelihoods of the populace, the people, the residents of the island. And that has wider implications as well, because we know that the amount of power that a nation brings on, and now amount of power that they create has a direct relation to the prosperity and the quality of living of its people. You look at places like Africa, where they have an abundant amount of geothermal and hydropower, but they don't have the ability to necessarily set up the infrastructure to pay for that power. And then that's kind of where Bitcoin miners come in. They allow them to build out these energy grids, and it gives the populace the ability to start to prosper and start to develop their countries more and more. And this is something that I am so excited about with Bitcoin mining. Is you talk about these waste to energy processes, you talk about the buyer of last resort that Bitcoin provides, and then extrapolate that out 50 years. What do these small island nations look like? What does the nation, these nations in Africa look like in 50 to 100 years, when they have the ability to compete on a nationwide level with first world countries like the United States. What are your
Mhm.
thoughts?
Yeah, absolutely. Technology like this has the capability of moving almost any third world country who wants to into being a second world country, which is the substantial step to attracting outside investment and getting an economic boom going to get them on the fast track to becoming a first world nation. All that takes time, but it's funny you mentioned Africa a couple of times because we are actively working with the Democratic Republic of Congo as well. So our Trend Discoveries founder, Brad Hoagland, who was featured heavily in the Tire Digester documentary as well, was invited out there to have some meetings, and it was an awesome discussion. We're looking at bringing the plastics processing plants out there, working heavily with in tandem with the government to help them clean up the streets because they don't have a lot of garbage processing capabilities, and start developing and building microgrids and start operating everything we can do to improve the lives of the populace there. um, there's a bunch of projects that they need assistance from assistance with from us, and we are really excited to get boots on the ground and see what we can do to stabilize everything there. And what's funny is there was a magazine article that came out from them, and had a picture of Brad with a bunch of them in meetings, and it talked about Trend Discovery and PowerLink, which is another entity that's going to be coming to light here to focus on the technology behind this solution, are coming to save the Congo. I'm like, whew, pressure's on, man. But this is the type of technology, if anything could, this is the type of technology that can. And we don't have to have an entire mega plant built out to start making a difference. Once we know that we've got the technology in development and on its way, then we can start with a um, plastics collection and washing and shredding plant, and start creating the feedstocks and building, bailing out the big cubes of the feedstocks that's going to go into it while we build the digesters and get those ready. What that does is that lets the people see, hey, yesterday there was 6 inches of plastic trash over there. Now it's down to 5 inches. Next week, man, they've cleaned up even more. When you've got on the sides of these roads these piles and piles of just garbage and trash, when people start to see their environment get cleaned up a little bit, when they start to see an improvement in what is in their immediate surroundings, they start to take better care of things.
Yeah. And something I'm immediately thinking about is the waste is obviously it's carrying bacteria, it's carrying pathogens, it's carrying disease. And this is a huge factor in, again, the livelihoods of these people. In America, we don't really think about this because our streets are generally clean. We have a decent quality of living in the United States. But to put yourselves in the shoes of people who are not just fighting for water, but fighting for survival on all
Hmm.
fronts. Like, these people every single day are struggling with finding food resources, finding clean water, not living in filth. And what excites me most is that there is finally a way for them to clean up their environment, but then also, if they so choose, they can start mining Bitcoin, which will be an economic boon for them in the long run. I mean, I am really excited, going back to this whole idea of West Africa is, I am really excited to see the kind of innovations, the kind of projects, the kind of the bright minds that come out of these nations. Because
Right.
just because you live in a third world country does not mean you are not as bright or as smart as people in the United States. I would argue that there are much smarter people in West Africa, in other parts of Africa, in other parts of the world, but they just haven't been highlighted or shown or given the opportunities that we've been given. And Americans are lazy. At the end of the day, we're so lazy. We have all of these great things that make our lives better. These other people in the world, they're struggling every single day, so they don't have the ability to focus
Yeah.
on these innovations.
And that struggle breeds ingenuity. When you have a really difficult set of situations, you have to find a way to circumvent it and get by. And being in that situation, you invent stuff or processes and things. It's absolutely fascinating to see, just in my travels that I've been through, the Caribbean and stuff, and through Mexico, seeing what people have come up with just to get by or solve a problem. Where if I had that problem, I'd go on Amazon and buy this $100 thing to fix it. They don't have that resource, so they have this problem. They get creative, they solve it. It's like, why didn't I think of that? I could have marketed that and done something substantial. But seeing people in situations of I don't necessarily want to say desperation, but in situations of need, being able to meet their needs in unconventional to us ways
Mm-hmm.
just means that there's another perspective to look at things, and that's gonna breed innovation with teamwork.
Mm-hmm. And I am curious too, what do you think the timeline is? Because in America, in these first world countries, we have a lot of regulations, and these regulations can be positive in some aspects, but really hinder us in the way that we build and we grow and we develop. You look at telephone infrastructure versus Wi-Fi infrastructure. A lot of these second world nations have completely jumped the telephone infrastructure. They've got cell phones and they're building Wi-Fi infrastructure. What happens, like, this is my question, what happens, what does it look like when these third world nations are able to skip all of that infrastructure build out and go directly to, Wi-Fi, or go
Mm-hmm.
directly to cell phones, go directly to Bitcoin? What does that look like?
That's a great question. So, to take a couple years back in my career, this was probably 2019, I think, maybe 2020. I was at a conference for the Federation of Internet Service Providers of America. And I was out there talking with some groups, and one of the guys there did a lot of work out in Africa and in countries like that, setting up wireless ISPs, point-to-point systems, high-powered microwave towers that would beam your signal, 40, 50, 60 miles, and be able to get remote villages connectivity through an air fiber link beamed all the way to the next, closest city, which is awesome. But that's expensive infrastructure, that's towers, that's people, running technology. Nowadays, with the advent of Starlink, for $500 and $120 a month, you can stick a thing on your roof and realistically get enough coverage to support a small community for things like cell phones and your telecom. So because of that, you're starting to see a lot of these more remote areas have little charging stations, sometimes solar charging stations, where you've got USB ports. You come in, you charge your phones, and they have a LTE network broadcast that runs through a satellite connection versus needing large scale infrastructure. And that's just an advent that's come in the last couple of years. So the innovation is coming, and what happens is it allows communication to happen in these smaller communities, and then decentralized currency like Bitcoin allows people to actually transact. A couple years ago, even, a lot of the thing that was holding back these smaller communities and these smaller countries is every other month there's a new warlord in charge, and they throw away the old currency. They print out new money with their face on it, and here's your new money. 6 months later, the same thing happens, and all of this money that you had is now worthless, and you're starting from square one again. You can't build businesses, you can't transact, you can't provide services. So it puts everyone into that hunter, gather, barter mindset where they can't grow and sustain. Now with decentralized currencies, Bitcoin and Ethereum and things like that, they can transact, and no matter what the localized currency of the week is, they have something that's stable, is not having its value kept to the local region, and is accepted everywhere.
That's wild, man.
Yeah.
I'm so excited with this stuff, man. So I'm gonna ask you a couple more questions, but because we're doing something new on the show, I wanna see. We've got 26 people watching live between the different channels. Guys, if you're watching live, send in a question. If you have any questions for Dan, we're gonna take some time and answer some questions. We've got about 20 more minutes. While we're waiting for some questions to come in, Dan, if any come in at all. What are your thoughts on the future of Bitcoin mining with technologies like this? And then let's frame this a little bit. So we have these large industrial pubcos that are not like their only revenue generation is the Bitcoin mined.
Mhm.
And this is becoming less and less profitable and much more difficult over the years. Every 4 years, we have a halving cycle. It cuts revenues in half. So with these waste to energy processes, with things like methane, things like rubber breakdown, things like the natural gas, what direction is the Bitcoin mining industry moving?
So the Bitcoin mining industry as a whole, the big guys, the giants, I think that they are going to start looking at augmenting some of their revenue generation into altcoins. We've already seen that quite a bit. I believe Mara was one of the first big adapters who started putting large volumes of Caspa miners into their mines.
Mm-hmm.
But we are starting to see a bit of an advent towards running some altcoins. L9s have been immensely popular. Through ASIC Plug, we've sold hundreds of L9s. It's phenomenal, and they're very high dollar, high performance machines. So I think that's going to be an aspect. But the other thing that we're seeing is co-location with AI and high data compute. So that, to investors and to regulators and to stuffy people in suits who don't understand the industry, see that, oh, it's not just crypto. It's not the greedy crypto bro sitting there stealing our power. It's AI data centers. It's AI compute. Okay, that's acceptable then. So we're seeing a lot of these places with dozens or hundreds of megawatts carving out 20, 30, 40 megawatts for AI and data compute. And that's not just because they can charge a power premium for all the redundancies and site management and stuff, but because it makes sense to change the perception of the populace on it. And I think the biggest factor for some of these larger mining companies and pubcos is going to be the heat reuse and the get away from the perception being greedy company stealing power to make money, and go to the perception of community investor creating power, creating jobs, and creating creating opportunities out there and being a positive light to the world. Because that's my motto is I want the world every day to be a better place because of something that I've done. And not to get too sappy, but I try to be a positive influence on everything, no matter what it is. And when this energy project came in on the tire and the plastics operations, I'm like, that's world changing stuff. That's like mind blowing. Decades down the line, there's a consistent improvement in life because of the work that I can do today.
Yeah. I mean, and not just for people in third world countries. It's it's going to change the world for everyone. And I've got a young son, and I want nothing more than to watch him grow up in a world that is healthy and good for life. A world where he can prosper based on his own merit. And that's a lot of why I really enjoy Bitcoin. And I came to Bitcoin for a lot of those reasons. But then getting to watch things like this project that you're working on, the heat reuse side of things, the energy or the waste to energy, getting to watch these projects slowly start to manifest. It's like, man, I am watching the world change as I sit here and I speak. I am watching the world change. I am seeing the world that I want to live in start to develop around me, and it's a beautiful thing. I'm not kidding, Dan. When I saw that documentary that we made, I mean, it gave me chills. Like it gave me physical chills thinking about the fact that holy shit, like we're going to change the world. We're absolutely going to change the world. And I would argue that anyone who is out there touting that I am a conservationist, I am an environmentalist, I want to see the world get better. If you don't believe in Bitcoin and the processes behind Bitcoin mining, then I don't think you're really an environmentalist. I don't think you're actually a conservatist. Like you have to be watching these things and going, holy shit, this is changing. It's changing the fucking world, man.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
It really is. And so much of the hate against Bitcoin is by people who are completely ignorant as to what Bitcoin is and how it works and how it impacts the world. They're of the mindset because they were told by the media, by memes, by some politician out there wagging their finger, and they're stealing our energy to get rich. And that's their mindset forever. It's like that's not how it works. It's creating jobs, it's stabilizing the global financial infrastructure. Before we had blockchain tech and before we had the ability to accurately guarantee transactions in microseconds, even 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when you would need to send a wire somewhere, you call up your banker, hey, I need to send $10,000 to this person. They call up that person's bank. They say, hey, we have an incoming transaction that's going to go through. They call into a third party. The third party's like, okay, I've notated this. We'll get it locked in. It takes 3 or 4 days. Nowadays, you got Cash App and Venmo and Zelle and PayPal and any of these systems where you can instantaneously transfer money accurately without risk of someone intercepting the transaction or without risk of something going on. Now, that said, people out there watching, be safe about it. There are scammers out there. There are people committing fraud. So do your due diligence. But the tools that exist for these are absolutely incredible.
Yeah. 100%. The way the world is changing, man, it's incredible. I love to see it. Guys, again, if you have any questions for Dan based on what we've been talking about, based on some of these processes, maybe how he sees the future of Bitcoin mining and just the future in general, send in these questions. Dan, I have one more question for you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question that I ask everybody who comes on the podcast because I think it sets the framework for why we do what we do and the philosophical motivations behind what we're doing. So, Dan, what does Bitcoin mean to you?
That is a great question. So I see Bitcoin as a stabilizing future. I know there's still risks out there of having, holding, spending, keeping, but when you look at the cyclical trends, I am personally a firm believer that it is going to continue to go up and be a phenomenal stabilizing force for the future, a hedge against inflation, and a means to future wealth. I was watching a video from I think it was Crypto Casey a couple days ago, and she posted a meme that was Neo asking Morpheus if in the future, will I, when do I know, or how do I hold my Bitcoin, or something like that. In the future, my Bitcoin will be worth more, and something. And Morpheus's response, like, in the future, you won't need to sell it because just holding it, you'll have enough wealth and generation that you'll be able to get by and run operations and maintain your lifestyle and support yourself from it. And that was centered around the generation of the new technologies and the new procedures coming around it, with allowing debt against Bitcoin, which is huge. The fact that traditional finance is now seeing Bitcoin as a viable asset to lend against is phenomenal. That is world changing in and of itself. One of my clients who does a substantial amount of mining is wanting to always procure more assets, get more equipment, grow their operations. And now that they can start leveraging the coin that they've already held without having to sell it, without having to trigger a taxable event, they can take debt on that, procure new assets in miners, generate new asset and coin, and pay down the debt and continue the cycle, is absolutely world changing.
I mean, you're not wrong. What comes to my mind is, to that person who wants to build a business, who, they've been stacking their Bitcoin for a while now and they've got a significant amount of Bitcoin, to that person who wants to build a business and start doing something better for the world or for their own family, they can now take this Bitcoin that they've stacked and not lose out on the gains, the momentous gains that they're going to be having in Bitcoin, but still use that capital to start to fund their operations. And that is, like you said, that's world changing. I mean, as someone who I'm an entrepreneur at heart, I love trying to find new ways, new innovative, creative ways to make money and to make the world a better place. It's like the biggest, most difficult hurdle is getting the capital needed to start to fund your operations, because nothing in the world is free. And when you can start lending off of your Bitcoin and still appreciate the growth and pay the loan off with, the revenue, the profit that you generate from the business that you're creating, I mean, that's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
And then, I was talking with someone when I was down in Naples for Bitcoin Day just the other day. He's created a product. It's not out yet, but he's created a product that allows you to use Bitcoin to get a loan for a home. And that's huge. If you can afford to pay the debt or pay the mortgage, you can use the Bitcoin to get a collateralized loan that allows you to get that mortgage, but you don't have to spend your Bitcoin in order to get it. And this is something that I've been pondering, is like, okay, well, what happens when my stack is big enough? Will I go out and purchase a home? It's like, most definitely I want to go purchase a home, like with land, and, be able to provide this to my family. But wait a minute, what if I can do that in a way where I actually don't lose the Bitcoin? That is inspiring.
Absolutely.
It's exciting. So, like, really the general idea in this podcast is Bitcoin is inspiring, and we're leading these innovative efforts that are changing the world, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm a firm believer, and I do mine. I've got a DG1 home right here. So I've got my Doge miner on my desk here. I've got a couple of Caspa miners in the server room. I've got a couple other miners. I've got a CKB miner in my garage. I've got a couple miners in hosting, and within Kratos, we've got a Bitcoin farm out in Pennsylvania operating on stranded gas as well. So I'm heavily involved in the mining aspect, and a firm believer, because it is continually generating assets for you. And even though they're ones and zeros on a computer, they are still monetizable assets. There is substantial value to them. And that's, I think, the thing that's been most difficult to explain to politicians, who are the most vocal out there speaking out against the industry because of the power consumption side. But now with the new Congress, the new House and the new Senate being substantially sided towards being pro crypto, and the new White House administration being pro crypto, I think that we are in for a very positive 4 years for growth and mining. Hopefully, some realistic and logical regulations come out, that they're talking about regulations on crypto. Hopefully, they are viable and not going to be detrimental to the decentralized nature of it. But even some new technology out there in the pools, like, if you guys haven't looked into in deep the powerpool.io guys, just look into it. Pull up their site and look around at some of their white pages and stuff. Powerpool has got some really cool stuff coming out. And when you're ready to put miners there, of course, hit me up. But I'm just super bullish and super excited on where the industry's going.
Same, man. Same. I think we're, we've seen a lot of really cool innovations, but I think we're just hitting the tip of the iceberg when it comes to what is going to be built from this. So I'm super excited. I'm very bullish.
Yeah.
Tell the audience, before we wrap up, tell the audience where they can get a hold of you. Do any quick plugs that you want to plug, and then we'll start wrapping up.
Yeah, absolutely. So for me personally, usually the easiest way is dan@asicplug.com or sales@asicplug.com. I'm also on Telegram in most of the groups. What is my Telegram handle? That's a great question. It is @Koehler Crypto. So like my last name @KOEHLER Crypto, all one word. And if you're looking to reach out to me regarding the digester, the plastics, the recycling things, D Kohler at KratosDigitalMining.com. And I'm sure that we can put links in the description or whatnot.
All the links will be in the description of the show notes. So
perfect. So yeah, we can list the email addresses there, and I'm excited to see what comes of it. We've got some really cool stuff that I can't quite talk about yet, but I'm super excited for the advent of the PowerLink entity, which is what is going to be the tire digester and the plastics processing and that group. I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, I am too. Let's just say, because like you said, we can't quite talk about it. Let's just say that people are going to be able to get involved, and it's going to be really exciting. So
yeah, community efforts and everyone coming together for positivity is we're going to change the world.
Absolutely, man. I'm so excited. Well, I just want to say, we got 30 people watching live on all the different channels. I just want to say thank you so much for tuning in live. Maybe we do this a little more often. Maybe we don't. We'll see how it goes. Either way, thank you so much for watching the Build a Mine podcast. If you guys want to help out the show in a free way, just, leave a like, a comment, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the X channel, and share it out. Get this message out there, share it out to your friends, help me build and grow this channel. In the last year, we've grown from, 0 to 300 people on the pod or on YouTube, which is awesome. But I want to 10X that this year. So help me grow this channel, help me spread this information, and help me learn how I can benefit the community in my own small way. Thank you guys so much. I really do appreciate you. Dan, I appreciate you for coming on the show and telling us all about what it is that you're doing. And thank you for driving this creative innovation to change the world.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll have updates soon, and I'm happy to jump on sometime in the near future as well.
Awesome. Definitely we'll do it. When you can talk more about what you've got going on, maybe we'll get you back on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thanks, guys. This has been the Build a Mine podcast, and we will see you next time.
Thanks, Trevor.